Sally, I guess what we'll do is we'll call the meeting to order and begin with the roll call.
Okay, Paul Kehoe,
Present.
Andrew Tennant,
I'm here.
Jeff Atkinson,
I'm here.
John Inglis,
Hello.
Roxanne Darling,
Present.
Kirby Thompson,
Here.
Bill King,
Present.
Cindy Kelsey, Faye Campbell,
Present.
Krista Lowry,
Present.
Bev Holmes, Bev Holmes? No?
Present.
Okay. Phil Sweetnam,
Present.
John Crow,
Present.
Eli El Shantiri,
Present.
Janet Mason,
Here,
and Glenn is absent. Okay, so I did not. receive-
I believe that's Eli L. O'Shantiri today.
I just said earlier, everybody Irish on St. Patrick's Day, even the Lebanese.
very good.
I was just checking. I didn't see a regret from Cindy, so she may yet join us.
Okay. All right, well, before we get to the agenda, first I'd like to welcome Andrew Tennant. So Andrew is our second representative from Carleton Place. So Andrew, I don't know if you'd just like to just say a few words to the rest of the board here. And
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I mean, unfortunate circumstances have brought me here, but in any case, I'm excited to be here. I follow loosely the Conservation Authority, particularly where it comes to planning. One of my wings of my company does a lot of work with foundations and work on the lake, so I'm always sort of aware of what's going on the development side of things. But I got a bit of a crash course from Sally the other day, and now I'm sort of just playing catch up with all the information. But I might be quiet for a little bit until I get my legs under me. So, but thanks for welcoming me.
all right, excellent. All right, so we have the agenda, and I was saying, I guess it was late last week when we were looking at this is an agenda of what I used to remember from before 2 years ago. It's sort of short and simple. So I was nostalgic about this agenda. All right, so resolved that the agenda for the March 17th, 2021 Board of Directors meeting be adopted as presented. I need someone to move. I see Faye Campbell moves.
Paul Kehoe.
Paul Kehoe seconds. Are there any comments on the questions on the agenda? All right, all in favor, raise your hands. All right, the motion is carried to accept the agenda. And we already did the introduction. So the next thing we will move into is the declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest? Nothing received, Sally, so all right. So now we have the minutes from the annual general meeting held last month. Resolved that the minutes of the Mississippi Valley Board of Directors annual general meeting held on February 17th, 2021 be received and approved as printed. I need someone to move. John Crow moves. Second, Eli El Shantiri. Any comments or questions? And everyone's okay with the minutes? All right, all in favor of approving the minutes? All right, the motion is carried. All right, now we get into the spring flood outlook from
Jen.
Afternoon, everyone. I'm just going to share my screen here. Everyone see that?
Yes.
Perfect. There we go.
I'm going to Home Depot to just pick up rods because the rods we have there just aren't working. Okay.
Thanks, sir.
So currently the watershed has started to see runoff from the mild temperatures and the rainfall we received last week. Levels and flows in the upper watershed saw very little runoff due to the ice still on the lakes. And with the thick ice, there is a growing concern of possible shoreline damage for most of the lakes this year. especially with lakes with smaller drainage areas that need to catch most of the runoff to meet summer targets. There is no suitable solution to this problem, since majority of the damage seems to be permanent docks and structures, which cannot be removed. So it's very difficult when we see the lack of snow, and we have to fill the lakes earlier in order to make sure we meet our targets. If dams are operated to maintain lake levels at static elevations during this time until the ice is completely off the lakes, then there wouldn't be enough water available to fill the lakes. So we have to be very careful and slowly build these lakes until the ice is out. We do right now have a concern about filling the lakes, especially if we lose more snow to sublimation in the next few weeks. We will have to depend solely on rainfall to fill the system if that happens. Crotch Lake is now at its lowest winter setting. It is still decreasing, even with the melt we had last week, but the rate is slowing down. We expect to start next week to start to fill the lake as runoff and flows continue to increase. Dalhousie Lake has climbed as the tributaries pick up flows, but with colder temperatures, levels have started to stabilize. I fully anticipate levels increasing again with the warmer weather on its way, but we should see some relief when we start putting logs back in Crotch Lake. That will slow the flow rate above, and it will help. It'll slow down Dalhousie Lake as well. Snowmelt has increased flows in the Clyde, but again, it's stabilized with the cooler weather. There is snow still on the ground upstream of Lanark, so continued warm weather over the next few days will increase flows again. Lanark Dam currently has 4 logs out, and we will be operating the structure to pass any increased flows. So we'll be operating that dam quite a bit in the next few weeks. Mississippi Lake has started to climb as inflows increase at Ferguson Falls. Flows have stabilized with the cooler weather again, but we expect it to increase when temperatures warm up. In the lower watershed, the ground is mostly bare. Now with the melt we had last week, we saw peak inflow with the snow melt that moved through Carp and Indian rivers. With the majority of the snow gone in this area, increased flows are not expected unless we receive significant rainfall. So yeah, we don't expect any kind of snow melt increase. So as of March 15th, we are seeing below average water content in our snowpack. With the recent warm weather having reduced the snowpack within the watershed by half. So that's a pretty dramatic decrease with what the few days we did see the temperature come up. The majority of the melt happened in the eastern part of the watershed. But there's still quite a bit of snow in the bush in the west end. So we are expecting more runoff in the days to come, especially with rain and warm weather in the forecast. and our density percentages are up, so the snow is ripe. So any kind of rain or warm weather is going to move that snow pretty quickly. So this is provincial snow data from March 1st. So I haven't received the updated map yet. So you can see here on March 1st, we had about average snow content or water equivalent in our watershed. So now that area is now pretty much yellow, and with the current data that we see. Now, I do have to stress again that the amount of snow or lack thereof it does not dictate if there will be a flood or not. Here's a graph for the snowpack for the last 20 years. And I added the spring peaks that were achieved in those years. You can see there's no correlation between snow amounts and the peak flows. You can see in 2018, we had very little snow and ended up with a pretty substantial peak. And in 2017, our peak was driven by rainfall and not snow. So we had a much higher peak than we did have snow amounts. In 1999 and in 2008, we had record snow amounts, but did not see those extreme peaks or any extreme flooding as a result of those extreme snow amounts. So flooding will always depend on timing and how the snow dissipates, how much rainfall occurs, and how quickly temperatures increase, and how much storage still resides in the system is a big factor. To show you guys how unpredictable spring setup can be, I put together a couple slides. Just showing the worst case scenarios that we've dealt with over the years, just to show you how extreme events can happen any given year. It all depends on certain timing and certain factors coming together and making that event. So here's 2019. We ended up with a major flood and hit many record levels on the lakes throughout the watershed. So this is Myers Cave, and it's up in the upper part of the watershed. But you can see here, we basically got hit with three factors all at once. We had the warmer temperatures. So the temperature started coming up. We had above average snow start to melt. And on top of that, we received a substantial rainfall over a course of a few days. So all those three factors factored into this large peak. If we had a mid-March melt that year, or if we had cooler temperatures going into April, that might have changed the outcome of that flood. So here is the opposite extreme, where we didn't see a spring at all. In 2015, we had below average snow content. We had excellent maple syrup weather for all of March. So basically sublimated all of our snowpack, and all the snow disappeared without any runoff. Then on top of that, we had no rain. I love it when people say, "Oh, we'll always have spring rain." Well, that wasn't the case in 2015. Our only saving grace was we had a very wet June that brought up some levels and flows, but we were very close to having a serious drought issue that year. So here we are in 2021. We have below average snow content. Temperatures are warming up. Looks like good maple syrup weather. Are we heading into 2015, or are we going to get substantial amount of rain in April and have too much water that we can handle? It's unpredictable. Weather will always be unpredictable. We can only react to what comes our way. And manage what we can. Looking at the long range forecast, looks like we're in luck. We are seeing a wet April and cooler temps. So that will, which will benefit us if we end up losing most of our snow content to sublimation. So for the flood outlook, based on the current snowpack conditions and what's currently in the forecast, the watershed could have a lower than normal spring peak. It now all depends on how much rain we receive in the next month. If above zero temperatures continue for the month of March, we expect to see an earlier drawn out freshet. So we could end up seeing multiple peaks, multiple low end peaks, not substantial peaks. But again, it'll all depend on the rainfall and if and when it'll happen. So something new coming out of the Water Resource Department, we have developed a new web-based tool, the Watershed Snapshot. I'm going to see here if I can pull it up and show you exactly what it looks like, and then see if I can do that.
Jen, typically you have to back out of your PowerPoint from presentation mode. So if you get out of presentation mode.
Okay, you can't see that?
We can see
now,
it.
yeah, now we can see it, yes.
You can see it? Okay, perfect. So this is the new tool. So it's the interactive map like the one on our website, except now it provides users with a quick and easy way to view current conditions in the watershed. So it includes these icons that show the real-time data along with historical max and mins, as well as historical averages and target ranges for these lakes. The user will now be able to visualize what conditions are. Before, they would just see a number and not fully understand what that number means. Is the lake too high? Is the lake too low? Now with the snapshot, you can see exactly where levels are in comparison to the min-max targets and historical averages. So that's something new that's come out of, it should be online in the next week or so. But yeah, that's the current conditions report. Any questions?
Yeah, could you stop sharing your screen so I can see if there's anybody with a question? All right, I don't see any questions or comments for Jen, so.
Can I ask a question? It's John Ingles.
Oh, yes, John.
Jen, are you going to announce the online tool to the public somehow?
Yes, we can do that. We can send out a press release.
Up where I live on the Upper Lakes here, it's always a matter of great interest to people to be able to predict what's going to happen to their lake levels in the next weeks.
Yeah. No, we'll definitely make sure that we'll send out, make sure everyone knows that it's coming and that it's going to be a very useful tool, I think, especially for the residents on the lake to keep track of of where they are in comparison to the historical norms.
Great.
So, Madam Chair, if I can ask Sally a question, perhaps not so much Jennifer. Sally, do we have any information how many of the municipality is doing the flood mapping? Because, you know, in a report from the province recommend municipality to do a flood mapping, so that could help collect that information. As I sit on a ministry working group, and it doesn't seem there's funding or direction to the municipality to do the mapping. Do you have any insight on this?
So I'll start the answer, and then if I miss anything, I'll ask Euro to flesh out my answer a bit more. So for starters, that LiDAR project that the board approved that we've sought NDMP funding for, it will provide us with the elevation data that we would need to build the model for the upper watershed. The second part of our funding application to NDMP is to develop and build that model. And that's the tool we would use to build floodplain maps. Now, if we don't get the NDMP funding, there is no other funding model in place that could assist municipalities in doing what is a very costly proposition. And that is, it will be an ongoing challenge because this was the last intake under the NDMP program. So if we don't get funding this round, you know, it remains unclear what funding mechanism might be available to CAs or to municipalities in future. Euro, did I more or less get that right, or is there any further detail?
Yeah, no, I think it was a good summary, Sally. Just to add maybe that really the NDMP project that we applied for would develop kind of like the high level watershed-wide flood risk assessment for the watershed and kind of define the key flood prone areas in our watershed that would be then prioritized for future floodplain mapping projects. That's really the idea.
Sorry, follow up, Madam Chair. So Sally, do you believe there's an opportunity for our chair and yourself to write to the province? Because as we move forward, I mean, the information we do with the flood mapping, and I'm talking specifically not, you know, on the Ottawa River, that's the most important part. And it's going to help if all municipality in that watershed will do it. But it's no point for Ottawa to have it done, Pembroke to have it done, but none in between, or from Pembroke to North Bay, none in, you know what I mean? Like, yes. So I'm not sure if, honestly, if people understand the impact of, to understand the flood mapping and the benefits from it, because really that trickled down all the way to the planning decision. And that's what's so important to understand this, because even LPAT today is making decision based on 50 years idea ago without making themselves current with what's happening because the lack of those flood mapping. So I'm not sure how important that is to my colleague on the call, because I don't think everyone is on the Ottawa River, but maybe we need to somehow, yourself or Janet, write to the minister encouraging, you know, that's a good investment to have in.
Well, I can just offer a couple of comments. So I 100% agree with you with respect to the Ottawa River. A comprehensive floodplain mapping exercise is required, and the municipalities, the further up the river you go, the less money they have to do the required work, right? So there's absolutely a need for the province and likely the feds, because it's an interprovincial waterway, to dedicate resources to this and make sure all those municipalities upstream have the floodplain mapping they need to do the proper planning. With respect to our own watershed, I would say that, you know, further to what Euro was saying, we're going to be able to do a high level assessment you know, in terms of flood prone areas, but to get in and do detailed mapping, particularly in light of climate change, because we are seeing a change in baseline conditions over time. So areas that haven't historically been flood prone may be in future, and that's where we'd want to be accessing additional funds to allow us to do that detailed mapping in those areas.
Okay, thank you. So Jennifer, thank you for your presentation. Sorry, but those questions was for Sally more than it is for your presentation, but I really appreciate your presentation.
No problem. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Jen. So we'll move on to the next topic, which is the loan for the Shabamika Lake Dam. And we need to move in camera for most of the discussion. And then my understanding is that the motion itself can be read out. The motion that we need to approve can be read outside of in camera. Move into camera. Resolved that the Board of Directors move to in-camera session for discussion of the following matters: a trade secret or scientific, technical, commercial, financial, or labor relations information supplied in confidence to the authority, which, if disclosed, could reasonably be expected to prejudice significantly the competitive position or interfere significantly with the contractual or other negotiations of a person, group of persons, or organization. And further resolve that Sally McIntyre and Angela Miller remain in the meeting. So I need someone to move. I see Jeff Atkinson moves. Second, Bill King. All right, all in favor? Motion is carried. We are now in camera.
Resumed. We don't have our secretary and we're not recording. So Shannon, now we're recording. Okay,
Do I have to do
apologies,
that
Janet.
again?
Do you mind, if you could please, for the official
sorry.
record.
All right. So I have to read this again. So resolved that the Board of Directors authorize securement of a loan for reconstruction of the Shabamika Lake Dam once it is confirmed that a 50% funding grant has been approved for the project, and authorize the general manager and/or treasurer to negotiate financing terms for a loan with Infrastructure Ontario or a financial institution, and authorize the chair and/or vice chair along with the general manager and/or treasurer to execute a loan with Infrastructure Ontario or a financial institution for the amount not covered by the WECI funding program. So I need someone to move.
Move.
I see Eli Onshanteri moves. I see Bev Holmes seconds. Any other comments or questions before we go forward? All in favor? All right, the motion is carried. Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, could I just comment that I thought there was a general consensus of people were saying go for the 25-year.
You have to be careful what you're saying outside of camera.
Oh, all right.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll set a note.
All right. So we now move on to what I'm sure will take hours of conversation: dogs at Conservation Ontario. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Janet. So we allow dogs at all our conservation authority or areas, but they must be on a leash. And for those of you who have visited our conservation areas this past year, you would know that we've seen an increase in popularity. Attendance is way up, and so as the visitation of people with their dogs. Off and on over the years, it has been talked about what opportunity there may be to allocate portions of our conservation areas as off-leash areas. There are pros and cons to doing that, and my report speaks to why generally dogs are not allowed off-leash at conservation areas. There's a host of reasons that I identify in the report there. And but people do it anyways. And so the question is, how do we manage this? So one obvious answer is, compliance promotion, educating people on why it's important not to allow your dog to run free. B, to enforce it, and actually ticket it. We have that power to ticket people, and they would be fined under the Provincial Offences Act for allowing their dogs off leash. But lastly, is the opportunity to create off-leash designated areas in our conservation areas. So what we're proposing here in this report is that the board give us the opportunity to do a period of enhanced compliance promotion where we're educating the public attendees on why they shouldn't allow their dogs off leash, followed by compliance blitzes, you know, where we're actually going out and potentially issuing warnings, followed by tickets. And then concurrent to all of that, we're positioning this as a broader issue that we as the Conservation Authority and them as users of our facilities need to engage in a conversation about what do we think about having off-leash areas, what are the pros and cons, the potential costs, and what areas might we designate. And we're speaking specifically at Milliken Tail, just outside of Elmont, and the Morris Island facility on the Ottawa River. And so we at staff level have served some notional ideas of potential areas that we, you know, could potentially map out and flag on the ground for people to illustrate. But before we move forward with any of this, we wanted to understand from the board what your feelings are on the matter and obviously make you aware of a desire to do enforcement action and seek your support for that. So I'll just turn it over for discussion.
All right, I see Faye Campbell, followed by Phil Sweetnam.
Did you feel that? I really think that the whoever enforces the laws have the right to find the people. There's lots of signage up, isn't there, that says that it's not leashed? But if we start giving out warnings, I'm sure we'll only have to give out a few, and then people would realize that we mean business.
That's certainly the desire, is to, you know, forewarn people, because many people are regular users, right? So do a sufficient forewarning, and then exactly that, you know, start by issuing warning, but then followed by fines. We just know that, you know, invariably when you start doing that, there's going to be a social media onslaught, right? So this is why we're coming to talk to you about it.
All right, Phil.
Do I understand that you are committing, though, to have some place where you would be able to have an off-leash area at the Conservation Authorities, at the sites?
We can't commit to that right now because we haven't, first of all, identified ourselves areas that we think are safe to have off-leash dog park from both a usability as well as the environmental integrity of, you know, our conservation areas. We need to be careful where we would actually site these things. Secondly, there invariably would be a cost because some or all of that area might need to be fenced. So we need to come back to the board, to you, to discuss, okay, here's where we think a off-leash dog park or run could be located, and here's the potential cost. Now on that, I just received in writing notice today about Ontario Trillium Foundation funding that may cover exactly this kind of thing. So depending on the deadlines, like I haven't even had time to read it extensively, but it seems to be for trails and exactly this sort of thing. Depending on when the deadline is, if it's far enough out that we're able to do this kind of consultation with the public, maybe, and we're able to develop some costing in-house, then we may be in a position to come back to the board and at minimum seek an opportunity for a grant application.
All right, I actually see hands up here. I see Roxanne, Jeff, Kirby, and then I think Bev. I think so. You'll be fourth. So Roxanne, please.
So there's a cost associated with enforcement also. And maybe if we had been having this conversation 2 years ago, I'd have a little bit of a different feeling on it. The education component of this is always positive. The more education, the better. Actual enforcement of it, I'd like to know what the cost of that is going to do in you know, reflecting on the budget. And if we could possibly enhance our conservation authorities to welcome more people, and in doing so, dog owners with an off-leash area, I think that's a great public platform for us. And in doing so, we get to share and educate and grow the conservation authorities' perspective to the public, I guess, not in a positive way. And I would encourage more outside, safe interaction with not only our conservation authorities, but pet owners.
All right, thank you. Any response that is needed for that? No? All right, Jeff, I think you're next.
Okay. I think I can echo what Roxanne just said. Anything involving dogs and their owners, this would be a tremendous PR opportunity for the Conservation Authority as a communications exercise, acknowledging that we're not alienating dog owners, that we actually want to make the experience better for everyone. But as part of an overall education, I've noticed from going through, I'm at the Mill of Kintail quite a lot, is it's not just dogs. There's the increased number of people coming to the conservation authorities. People are coming, and I don't think they make a difference in their minds between a conservation area and a park. And if that could be part of the education process, letting people know why their dog has to be on a leash, why they have to stay on the trails, because I've seen just as many photographers traipsing through beds of well, quite frankly, endangered species to go and take a picture of a single flower that they're probably never going to post. And that education needs to happen. It's an opportunity to let people know what a conservation area is, why it's important, why they should stay on the trails. And that's why your dog has to stay on the trail with you. Might be a better approach than any rumors of banning dogs or persecuting the pooches on social media. And an off-leash area opportunity would be tremendous, especially there. People do it, but if the education goes into why you stay on the trail first and focuses on that, I think we can have a winning communication exercise.
Thank you. So now it'll be Kirby, then Bev, and then Eli. So Kirby?
Yeah, my feeling on it is, if you're going out for a walk in the afternoon and you take your dog, you're going to the park or the conservation area, that's great. I don't think we have to have a place, for dogs. And I'm not saying we don't have dogs. I have a dog myself. I love my dog, but I think I would just soon have it on a leash, because some people don't control their dogs very well, and you end up with a lot of chaos. So if it's just controlled that way, unless you said, like, if it's in a kennel, but then you have all these other issues with the money and all that. But I mean, she just said there's grants. Sally said there's grants available, maybe, but I'd be more in favor of just leaving them on a leash, would be my opinion on that. Thanks.
All right, Bev, Holmes.
Thank you. So I agree with Jeff. I think there needs to be more education around what the conservation area is. I'm down at the Mill of Kintail, once in a while also, and I notice people are just not respectful of where they should be moving, irregardless of dogs. The other thing that's maybe I'm out to lunch on this, but is it in our mandate to have a dog park? That they need maintenance, that they have to be cleaned. It is costly to put up a fence. I know Jeff could probably tell us that because they have a dog park in Carlton Place. So I would just wonder about the mandate of the Conservation Authority. If we can't have a museum, can we have a dog park?
Very good point. All right, Councillor El-Shantiri.
I like the question Bev posed. I wish we can post it anyway. Before we get too far ahead, I think we need to honestly start with the education piece and dog on leash first, because before we go to the next step, we want to see how that's going to work for us. In many areas, I have to tell you, and especially since the pandemic and more people are walking everywhere, almost, not just everywhere, on trail, on conservation area, on the beach, you name it, more people than ever before. and to have a dog is not unleashed, is creating quite a bit of problem for us. So I speak for the Morris Island because we're having a problem keeping that place even with a minimum clean, minimum lack of garbage, minimum, stick to the, we have an accessibility trail there for people on accessibility, and to have the dog loose, it'll create its own challenge. So before we do, and I think we should take a step by step and see how that result for us. But I, for one, I have to agree with Bev. This is way too out of our mandate. And to be honest with you, there's municipality should be able to do a dog park if they wish to do a dog park or fencing area, because it's very costly. And if we cannot keep it up, so we're going to ruin it for everybody, the experience.
All right, thank you, Councillor. I'm going to close off the discussion unless there are any other points, because we're now going to get to a resolution. All right, so resolution. Resolved that the board approve public engagement regarding potential installation of an off-leash dog walk area at the Mill of Kintail Conservation Area and/or the Morris Island Conservation Area, and a period of enhanced compliance promotion followed by an enforcement blitz at the above conservation areas to curb off-leash dog walking. So I need someone to move. See Bev Holmes moves. I see second by Phil Sweetnam. Any further discussion on this resolution?
I would ask for a recorded vote, please.
A recorded vote. All right, Roxanne? Yes? Sorry, you're on mute, Roxanne. No, you're still muted. Sorry, Roxanne, you're muted.
Is that better?
Yes.
Sorry about that. I would just wonder if there is any entertainment for anybody to move an amendment to that motion and take out the offenses part of it, compliance and issuing fines,
right,
and just stick to the education at this point in time, see how that goes. And if we need to start enforcing, then it would come back as a separate agenda, a separate motion.
Okay. And John Carreau?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would be so inclined to amend the motion in that fashion, that priority first be given to compliance promotion. On the lighter side, it's nice to see that we don't view dog ownership as a conflict of interest.
I was keeping my mouth shut. All right, so here I'm going to suggest the following amendment. So I'm not going to reread the first part, but if we said part 2 would be a period of enhanced compliance promotion at the above conservation areas to curb off-leash dog walking. So it takes out the enforcement blitz. Is that more amenable? I think I'm seeing some nods of heads, nods of bubble heads. Very good. All right, so we come back and we need to move, sorry, Krista Lowry, yes?
So I just want to be clear. So we're keeping both parts of this recommendation, both parts 1 and 2?
Yes, but yes, with I could read it again then to make it clear.
Yes, sure, if you don't mind, please.
Okay. All right, resolved that the board approve public engagement regarding potential installation of an off-leash dog walk area at the Mill of Kintail Conservation Area and/or the Morris Island Conservation Area. And then 2, a period of enhanced compliance promotion at the above conservation areas to curb off-leash dog walking. So we're not committing to the first, we're just committing to engagement of the public and getting feedback and looking at the problem or the issue. Yes, Krista.
Could I ask that we split the motion?
Yes, absolutely. You would like to have 2 separate motions?
I would, if you wouldn't mind.
Oh, are people comfortable with that? I knew this would be exciting. I knew, you can't help this. All right. All right, so we're going to have, John, do you still have your hand up? Or is that, no, okay. Sorry, Bev, yes, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm can you, am I, okay, you can hear me?
Yes.
I'm still wondering, like, seriously, should we even go to the public if it's not a part of our mandate? Are we going to get everybody excited about it off these dog park and then have to say, oh, geez, no, we can't do it?
All right, what if we, I see you, Andrew, but I'm going to submit, what if we made an amendment to the first, which is instead of public engagement, would be engaging, that staff engage in a study of it, or do we want to just nix it entirely? I'm wondering if the study by staff could include whether it would be included in a mandate, because we do have a mandate for conservation areas. And what's at a conservation area? Maybe there is some leeway. I mean, I know that the museum is not, but I don't know. Like, so I'm just putting out that maybe a brief review by staff that they would then come back and report on this, or do we want to mix it entirely? Okay, I see a whole lot of hands. I guess, Andrew, you're next.
I think what you suggested makes some sense. I don't know if a whole study is required, but clarification on Bev's question is certainly necessary. I wonder if it could be deferred with just some simple questions to be answered, like that one, and then we could go ahead and vote on the second.
All right, so before I get to the other hands up, so what I'm hearing is remove item 1 entirely from the motion. And to just have item 2 that talks about a period of compliance for on-leash dog walking with a direction to, I think it doesn't need to be a resolution on, but a direction to Sally or staff to just come back to us on whether an off-leash area would even fit within the mandate. I think that's what I'm hearing. Okay, so I see in terms of hands up, I see Kirby.
Yeah, I just, I don't want to sound like an old grouch, but I mean, I agree it's a good idea, but I don't think we should have to have staff engaged in doing this type of work when we have lots more work to do. You know, I just think we could use that time better. It could be better used someplace else.
Okay, so
That's
I'm sensing that we don't want item 1 at all. And that we simply want to encourage a period of enhanced compliance promotion at our conservation areas to curb off-leash dog walking, and that we can provide a direction to our general manager to simply take a look at whether off-leash fits within our mandate, and then have another discussion, if necessary, on this topic to bring it back to the board. How does that sound with everybody? Everyone okay with that? Okay. All right, so I'm going to read the resolution, the modified resolution again. Resolved that the board approve a period of enhanced compliance promotion at the Miller-Kintail Conservation Area and the Morris Island Conservation Area to curb off-leash dog walking. So that's the motion now amended. Do I see, can I need someone, just Sally?
You're going exactly where I wanted you to go. I need a seconder.
Okay,
yay.
Elbow me in the ribs here. Okay.
Sorry.
I need someone to move the amended motion. I see Roxanne Darling moves. I see Paul Kehoe seconds. Any further discussion? I shouldn't ask that. All in favor of the amended motion? All right, I see the motion is carried. And if we may put in the minutes, Sally, if you could just take a look at the mandate for something like an off-leash area for conservation areas. I don't know if other conservation areas have them, and then we could have another discussion at the board.
Sorry, Madam Chair, you probably are fast. You are definitely faster than I am. I didn't get my hand up quickly enough. There is still a question as to, is it just Morris Island? Is it, the question really is, what about the new carp conservation area? Should that be included in the list?
That's City of Ottawa, and I guess so is Mississippi, Morris Island. But dogs are required to be on leash under the City of Ottawa. It's like it's a walkway. Like I don't see how you could do an off leash there. But it's a worthwhile question. I'm just trying.
It's not a question of whether it's a jurisdictional matter. It's really a question of, is that problem wider? than the two
Yes,
conservation areas mentioned in the motion. So I would just, I'm fine to let the motion stand. I would just perhaps make that as an observation afterwards.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Dogs. All right, so next a verbal update from Sally on grants.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to pull up my PowerPoint here. Oh, can everybody see that all right?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. So we've applied for or are intending to apply for or in the process of applying for a lot of grants. And so I just wanted to run down these with you very quickly, just so you had a sense of where we're going. You may recall that in association with the 2021 budget, the board did approve that we apply for grants for those things contained within the budget. So we have submitted our application to WECI, and we do and hope to hear back within the next 3 to 6 weeks. We also every year apply for the Canadian Museum Operating Grant, and it's in progress. It's not due yet, but we're working on it right now. We've already submitted applications for summer students. You may recall that to accommodate the funding cut from the province, we did cut funding for our students, so we are reliant on grants for all our student positions at this point. Similarly, Career Launcher is a program we've used in the past to bring on contract staff, recent grads, and so we're hoping that they're going to renew the program this year. All indications are that they will, and that might help us to round out our staffing for our summer programming. Then there's all sorts of special grants that have been issued under COVID-19. We just received notice from CRA. Was it yesterday or today, Ange?
Doesn't matter. Just
it was today. We just received.
Yeah. So that they've officially notified us that they want us to pay back all the monies that we had received under that program. It's for different periods, and so while they're only investigating us for some periods, the risk is that for all of the periods that we applied for and received funding, we might have to refund that money. Now, I have a meeting tomorrow afternoon with all the CAs in Ontario that applied for and received that funding, and collectively we're looking at whether there's an opportunity to appeal the CRA decision and to fight it. What it comes down to though, and this is no small matter, is whether or not just for this program, but universally, we want to be considered a public agency or a nonprofit. And so that's no small question. So whether or not we fight this has implications for how we want to be viewed by CRA, not just now, but in future. So I will be reporting back to the board on this as things unfold. The Canadian Healthy Communities Initiative, we submitted for the KMP Bridge. That was a major capital project that we only partially funded on the assumption that we would try to get additional funds from the counties. And so we're cautiously optimistic that we will get that. It met all the criteria very nicely, we felt. And I think we put in a very strong application. So we'll see how that unfolds. The Investing in Canada Infrastructure, this is the one where all the municipalities in the watershed received at least 100,000 for specific type projects. At the end of the day, all of you understandably found other things that were more important to your organization and that you individually wanted to pursue. So there were no real opportunities that arose from that. I've already discussed a fair amount today, the National Disaster Mitigation Program, so I won't go into detail. I'll just say that we cleared the provincial hurdle and we're anxiously awaiting notice from the feds whether or not we receive funding. We were on a call earlier today with the Eastern Ontario CAs who we're partnering with, and we're ready to put this on the street, but of course we can't close it and issue any kind of contracts until we hear back from NDMP. We had received a bunch of grant commitments last year that we weren't able to exercise. And so we're in the process of following up with them to see whether or not there's an opportunity to use those funds this year. You may recall that in the 2021 budget and in the interim financial plan, the board agreed to a 3-year pilot for a stewardship program. And so those funds would be very helpful in allowing us to implement the program this year and build on it over time. And then the most recent ones to walk in the door were, it's called the Nature-Based Climate Solution. This is a grant program that's by invitation only that the feds have issued to some key environmental organizations across Canada. And so Ducks Unlimited has been talking to us as well as other CAs in Ontario and other organizations. And they're putting in a comprehensive proposal to the feds. So I was on the phone with them just this morning talking about potential projects that would fall under that. One of the ones was support for the stewardship program. The other one is a project that's identified in the CARP Subwatershed Plan or Action Plan, which is a wetland restoration project. It's not anywhere on our 10-year capital plan and the like, because it's not in terms of the priorities of the organization. It wasn't on that needs and gaps list that we prepared for the board last year. But if obviously we got funding from the feds in partnership with Ducks Limited, it makes a huge difference to the possibility of moving forward with a project like that. And then lastly is the 2 Billion Trees program. And this is something that we've only just started discussing in-house, again, in association with our stewardship program, but also possibly, in terms of some of our new sites. I'm thinking in particular the new Carp River Conservation Area. So, and if there's any other grants that you're aware of that you think we may be interested in, please send them on to me. The one thing I caution is that, of course, we need to have the resources on the inside to deliver on the projects that we're applying for. And often we need the matching dollars, which is why the board directed that we only apply for things where we had much matching funds available. So I'm happy to take any questions on that. Stop share.
All right. Any questions for Sally on that? Councillor El-Shantiri?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Sally, for your presentation. I know you've done well in the past with those funding available, but most of the what's happening. I mean, we had asked our staff in the city to be shovel-ready project, to have project on ready at any time, because we don't know, quite honestly, when the announcement been made, and some announcement been made, but there's no detail on those announcements, how you even apply for, because they're not even they're just asking for ideas and stuff. So I was wondering, is Conservation Ontario, or maybe not so much Conservation Ontario, but have you and your other colleague within the city limit, have you talked to the city of Ottawa and see, what kind of program out there is available, and how can we take advantage, working collectively with other CA at this time? I'm more interested locally than go province-wide.
So yes, we've had several meetings with Steve Willis and Kevin Wiley and their staff. As the city was developing its long list of projects, we were, provided the opportunity to review them and see if there were opportunities for us to sort of ride on the city's coattails where we provide an enhancement to a proposed city project. Unfortunately, there wasn't a whole lot of opportunity for that within this particular watershed. It was more in the Rideau's watershed, which goes right downtown. It has all sorts of, tiering opportunities. But in short answer is yes, we absolutely were looking at those opportunities.
If I can follow up though, and I know I don't expect staff to engage politically, but maybe the chair or a board member can reach out to their local MPs or MPPs. And I mean, there's a lot of funding available, but it all comes 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, and you will be challenged sometimes. Where would we find the funding? Like we had a application the other day to upgrade some road, and it's very small amount, but then only the federal government will contribute 15%. So basically, you have to get 85. So I understand they're all different, but I'm glad you're keeping an eye on it, and if you can somehow remind the city treasurer or someone in the municipality to share with you any information comes about what's funding available, because I follow up quite a bit about the broadband in the rural area, not necessarily in my area, but right across Ontario, and we're having a challenge to understand how they make those decisions. So there's money available, but we don't know how they make the divvied up, like is it P3 is with the private sector or with the municipality? So anyway, I just want you to know there's quite a bit happening with the stimulus coming, but I'm not sure how much benefit for small conservation can see from those big ticket items.
All right, yes, Sally?
If I could just respond quickly, two things. Kudos to Steve Willis. He was the one that emailed me just this morning about the Trillium Foundation one. So absolutely, we're getting good feedback from senior management at the city on those sorts of things. With respect to shovel-ready projects, it is a challenge for us. We're already behind the 8 ball in terms of doing our asset analysis and getting that queue ready. And you've already seen the 10-year capital plan. So we're just we're in catch-up mode is what it boils down to. It'll be a while yet before we'll be so caught up that we'll have shovel-ready projects just waiting for the funding.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Sally, for you.
Yeah, and I will give you a warning on Trillium Foundation grants, and they are from hell, not only to put together, but to report on. All right, so if there are no other questions or comments, we'll move on to the annual report. Sally, you had a verbal on that, and then we have a number of special reports on topic areas, which should take us just to 3 p.m. Sally, you're on mute. We can't hear you. Sally, we can't hear you. You're on mute.
Thanks. Sorry, I had to get out of share screen to deal with that. So there we go. Okie doke. So I think you should be able to see and hear me now. Is that correct? Okie doke. So these are the key areas that we've divided our programs and services into, and it more or less reflects what the new legislation says when it is enacted. So I'm just going to run through each one and mainly focus in on what changed in 2020 because of COVID-19 and some of the key accomplishments. So this slide shows you the scope of activities that we undertake in terms of natural hazard risk management. And the only area that was really impacted by COVID-19 in 2020 was our spring water hazard program that we delivered to schools regarding risks around water in the springtime and ice safety. Otherwise, all of those activities were carried out this year. Some of the highlights were, of course, all the work around the Shabamika Lake Dam, where we conducted this technology review that you'll remember we came back to the board on regarding which type of gate. We commenced the whole detailed design. We implemented new monitoring procedures there because we do have safety concerns around the dam, and so that's ongoing. We also did the risk assessment at the Kashwakamak Lake Dam because you'll recall that when we had an initial assessment done, we were wondering whether or not the urgency was there. And so that's where the board agreed to us carrying out further investigations and deferring doing the EA for a couple of years or doing the renewal works for a couple of years while we carry out that work. We also did some temporary fencing at Widow Lake We're managing an EA on behalf of the city up at Carp Creek. We did some installation of new gauges across the watershed. These gauges are the ones that help inform our log operations, and it's the likes of which you saw in Jen's presentation earlier today. This is the real-time kind of data that we use not only to do day in, day out operations, but do the long-term predictive modeling. Of course, log operations happen throughout the year. We also obtained approval in principle from North Frontenac to secure easements around Mazenod and Frontenac dams. And in fact, I'm presenting to council this Friday to hopefully get final sign off on that. And in addition, a huge part of our risk management program is, of course, the administration of our permitting process and planning reviews on behalf of the province and municipalities. And these are the two areas that you're going to hear detailed presentations on subsequently. So we also did a lot of work this past year in terms of modeling and mapping. We surveyed the entire of the Carp River. We produced all sorts of frequency mapping on Constance Creek, Huntley Creek, and that included doing what the city's requested, 1 in 350. And this is like a proxy for what the future might look like under climate change conditions. We created the hydraulic model for Casey Creek, and we did bathymetric surveys, which is underwater surveys of the lakes in the watershed. Just quickly, so that you know what I'm talking about when we're doing this kind of work, we're literally on the water, taking depth and XYZ, so elevation and longitude, latitude of the riverbed and the slopes, as well as the impediments. So this picture sort of illustrates as we move down a water course, we're trying to pick up at key locations all of these XYZ coordinates, because that's what helps us to build the model and then do the predictive analysis and to create our floodplain mapping. Moving on to conservation areas, the only areas that was really impacted in 2020 because of COVID was our education program, which you'll recall the board approved suspension of, our summer camps. We had to severely curtail on our events and our rentals of the gatehouse. We did continue bookings for weddings, but of course we had to implement all sorts of revised measures around that. And we had to up our washroom cleaning. So some of the key things that we had to do was, all sorts of site signage, and the enhanced washroom cleaning was a significant burden, because initially it was 2 times per day at every site. As we moved into the winter season, we were able to dial that back. But now that we're entering the summer season or the warm weather, we're going to have to up that again. We had to create an enlarged parking area at the Milliken Tail. Museum visits were down, but overall visitation was up. And you can see the third last bullet there, our parking pass revenues increased from 25,000 to over 51,000. So that, illustrates to you the kind of growth of usage we saw last year, mostly attributable to COVID-19. The interesting thing to note was that the 2019 would have captured the increase in visitation we would have seen associated with the Raptors win. So we already thought we were seeing increased visitation in 2019, and we've more than doubled that in 2020. So strong impact of COVID-19. We did coordinate with Mississippi Mills. I can't tell you the status of it today, but they are introducing parking limitations outside of the Milliken Tail to address with some of the sight lines and safety issues at the entrance. And then in lieu of the camp program, we developed and delivered that whole outreach program at boat launches, conservation areas, and the like. So, and we got good kudos for that. We also did that KMP structural assessment, which was a big deal and which we're still, working on, because now we're in consultation with the public about next steps. Snowmobile Club, and for them to rebuild the railings. It looks great. Everybody's very pleased. We got a lot of kudos for that, and particularly the Snowmobile Club because they provided the labor. We did all the engineering, they did the labor and the materials. We also signed that 5-year agreement with the City of Ottawa. So we now have a new CA, the Carp River CA. We were able to get some signs installed before freeze up. And of course, across our conservation area, we've been maintaining all our trails. In terms of the drinking water, source water protection program, there were no impacts associated with COVID-19. And most of the changes that you've seen are largely administrative to bring on new intake or wells at municipal drinking water systems. You may recall that you approved new policies regarding chemicals in water or as potential risks to the water supply. When it comes to our natural resources management program, monitoring was definitely impacted. We did no electrofishing. We weren't able to pursue any of our special studies. And our septic program was curtailed because the Central Frontenac decided to back off that program this year, last year because of COVID. But we were able to still accomplish a lot across the watershed, and this summarizes where we were focusing. We always do the main stem lakes. And this year we had a focus on Buckshot subwatershed, and you can see the lakes that we focused on. We weren't able to do some of the habitat work or the city's Stream Watch program, which is a stewardship type program, but we were able to midsummer resume the baseline monitoring program we do on behalf of the City of Ottawa. Those are sites across the City of Ottawa in our watershed that is monitored every year at certain times a year for a fixed number of parameters, and that's provided that kind of longitudinal database that the city has been able to develop on water quality on its tributaries. As well, we were able to do work on the provincial water quality program. The other big thing in this regard was, of course, progress we made on the Mississippi River Watershed Plan. We've made tremendous progress there, and right now we are, out there consulting on these discussion papers that were released early in the new year based upon all the work done last year. And the board, you'll remember that you signed off on goals and objectives, and so we'll be coming back to you later this spring with a set of actions that have undergone public review that will allow us to formulate that, that final watershed plan. So on the governance side of things, there was a whole host of things we all had to grapple with due to COVID-19, and I'll share this PowerPoint with you subsequently, but many of you had to go through exactly the same thing at your municipality, so you would see a lot of the same sorts of things on this list as you would have in your own municipalities. And but outside of that, of course, due to the Section 39 funding cut, we had to adjust programming. We were able to complete that needs assessment gaps analysis on our capital and operating program, and to come back with a 3-year interim financial plan and an update to the 10-year capital plan. Those were huge pieces of work that the senior management team undertook over the summer and fall months. We also did some administrative changes, and then we embarked late in the year on starting to prepare for doing the corporate strategic plan. The deadline last Friday. Thank you for all of you who were able to participate in that survey and comment. We'll be following up with you shortly in terms of next steps. And then we also began the work of trying to figure out how resources will need to be captured and managed and funded under the new Bill 228 funding mechanism under our Conservation Authorities Act. Lastly, we had all sorts for a small organization, new hires, including our new Director of Water Resources Engineering, who's on the phone, as well as Erica Ogden, who you're going to be hearing from shortly. Unfortunately, our GIS specialist left us shortly, ago. He went back to his old organization, but we've since luckily been able to replace him with somebody new who was previously screened. So we've barely skipped a beat there, and so we're quite pleased. We implemented a new performance review program, which I think staff collectively have felt good about, and late in the year, you'll recall we did the evaluation and market review of several jobs. And because of COVID-19 and just generally as a staff refresher and builder, we had an event out at the Milliken Tail in September one afternoon, and it was lovely, and it was much needed by everybody. I think I'm going to skip over the rest. They involved the outreach we did to yourselves at the municipal levy as well as the county. And I just want to say thank you to all of you for the support that you've shown us over the past year. It was a very challenging year for all of us. And so the fact that all of the municipalities came to the table and were supportive was very much appreciated. So at this point, I'm going to stop sharing and turn it over to our first presenter who are going to do.
Sally.
Yes.
Sorry, I just wanted to question, we are at 2:40.
Yes.
And I'm just wondering how long each of these three presentations are and whether they could be done in 10 minutes each. So we finish, a little bit after 3.
I think that they can all be delivered in 10 minutes if the people on the line who are delivering them take that mandate, because none of them have a huge amount of slides. I would just ask Kelly, you might have to scan over skip a couple of slides there.
Well, I'm just going to be asking again, is it worthwhile moving one of these to another meeting so that we get the full benefits? I don't want to cut off people, but I know that most people, they cut off at 3 p.m., right? So I'm just mindful of that deadline. So what would you recommend?
I'm going to say that you need to hear the first 2 reports for sure regarding planning regulations and compliance. Actually, I think in the agenda, it might be the stewardship one first. I think maybe we can do the stewardship one subsequently at another meeting if we run out of time, because we need to come back to you with a detailed work plan on the stewardship program for this year.
So let's say that we do, and I also think it'd be nice to have Glenn Gower here for the Pool Creek.
True.
So why don't we defer the Pool Creek? Sorry, Kelly, I'm dying to hear it, but I think it'd be good to have Glenn here, and let's do the planning and permitting and compliance management and see if we can fit them in, at roughly 10 minutes each. Okay, so let's start with planning and permitting.
Can everybody hear me, see the screen presented?
Yes.
Excellent.
Yes, if you can speak
So
closer to
as
the
Sally
microphone.
mentioned, as Sally mentioned, my name is Erica Ogden. I am one of the new environmental planners with MVCA, and joining me on the presentation today is Diane Reed. So I'll just kind of run through the first couple slides we have here. So MVCA's role in watershed management, we're involved a lot in the Planning Act processes, and that involves a whole host of different applications, be it minor variances or severances, anything all the way up to official plan amendments. And we're really looking at those things from a provincial interest, looking at things like natural hazards, natural heritage. We also provide information through our advisory services with both the City of Ottawa and the County of Lanark, which we have memorandums of understanding with, to really cover some of those broader environmental area topics that we'll get into further. So as Sally covered in her overview, 2020 was generally a fairly busy year for planning applications across the watershed. So we saw quite a variety of applications across different municipalities, but definitely seeing a high number in the areas of Mississippi Mills and the City of Ottawa, and into Lanark Highlands as well. So on this next slide, you can kind of see it broken down by a map of the watershed geographically, where we're seeing a lot of the bigger developments happening around the edges of the urban areas around City of Ottawa and Canada and Stittsville, but also within Mississippi Mills as our urban boundaries around Almont and into Carleton Place as well are starting to expand. So I'll pass it over to Diane to talk about what we look at.
So yeah, what's considered when we look at or review a planning application, so minor variance, zoning amendment, and so on. We primarily look at it from both of the hats we wear, one from an advisory role, and secondly, from our regulatory role. We also want to make sure we're identifying where a permit is required for these applications as well. So from an advisory role, we're looking at fish habitat. That primarily relates to the water body setback and how close is the development, how much is being proposed. And we're just trying to preserve the near shore area, so that 30-meter setback from the lake as much as possible. We take our direction from largely from guidelines prepared in support of the provincial policy statement. And the goal is just to minimize new development within that 30 meters and to maintain a vegetated buffer. We also look at ANSIs, not as involved with those because that's primarily an MNRF consideration, but we do consider it to some degree. Water quality and quantity, largely insofar as the review of hydrogeological studies and stormwater management plans. In our regulatory role, again, this is where there's we alert the municipality to the fact that a permit is required from us for this application as well. So we're looking at natural hazards, flooding, erosion, unstable slopes. We're also looking at provincially significant wetlands and the 120-meter adjacent lands to those. That's regulated by the authority. And then new as of 2017, the fall, are other wetlands that we now issue permission for as well. We can move on to the next slide.
Yeah. So when we're doing our reviews, as Diane mentioned, we're looking at those implementation of the provincial policy statement. And so we're really trying to make a partnership with our local municipalities to look at those areas of providing sustainable economic development and really trying to encourage the use of our areas across the region. And we have the opportunity to focus on some of the value of green infrastructure, things like low impact development and introducing those to the area. So by serving as sort of a water resource management agency, we have that opportunity to do an integrated review. We are one agency that will look at a variety of issues from engineering to stormwater and natural heritage and water quality. So that really provides some efficiency at the municipal level.
So some things to note for 2020, we have found a huge surge of pre-consultation requests and inquiries. I would say certainly more than ever. With respect to pre-consultation, I just want to stress the importance of pre-consultation. It's important, in aspects where our regulatory role may be more restrictive. If you're in the floodplain and there's size restrictions that apply, it's good for the applicant to know that sooner than later. And also to arrive at a compromise, again, sooner than later before the applicant spends a whole lot of money on plans. It just benefits everybody. Get increased inquiries. We do have our internal tracking and reporting system now called CAD-IMS. That's pretty much in full force now, including the logging of inquiries, which is helpful when you look back to see what was said before. Official plan reviews underway. City of Ottawa started, I believe, in 2020, and I believe it's ongoing. Again, I already mentioned wetland regulations came into effect that we implemented policies in 2017. Prior to that, there was really no mechanism to protect wetlands, so that has been that's been a good improvement. Low impact development, that is something that is it's been a bit of a challenge, but we are finding that it's gradually being accepted and adopted into plans, which is into stormwater management plans, which is good to see. With respect to the waterways and the health of the waterways, we do have a monitoring program where 5 lakes, I believe it's a 5 lakes each summer, are monitored for quality, water quality parameters, and generally they are in good health. More challenging variances around the lakes. I'll speak about that a little bit more in a later slide, but I don't think it's a surprise to know that we are finding that there's a real surge in, and there has been for some time, but even more so it seems in the last year, to redevelop these small cottage lots into permanent residential lots with a much larger footprint. We do have there is a septic reinspection program, which is strongly encouraged. It's a program to inspect septic systems around the lake country and to make sure that they're functioning properly, so there's no impacts to water quality. Stewardship recommendations along the shoreline, that's primarily as far as what I get involved in, and Erica would be recommending shoreline plantings, which has been shown to be hugely important to maintain water quality.
So we'll just end with some of the challenges that we do come across when doing plan input and review. And a real big one that we're running into more often is a lot of the easy to develop land has already been developed. So we're seeing that a lot of the applications we're dealing with there's increased pressure for development are far more constrained with these natural hazard, natural heritage features. So that means that each review we are doing is becoming a lot more complex and is taking a lot longer for us to complete because we're starting to involve a lot more disciplines in each review. So that really puts some demand on staff, especially given these growing expectations to see greater demand and responses from the conservation authorities when we're also then struggling with the diminished funding at a provincial and federal level. Diane, do you want to finish the last couple?
Sorry about that. I had a bit of a coughing fit there. Excuse me. So with regard to timelines, it can be difficult at times to try and meet some of those timelines. It depends. Sometimes there's insufficient time provided, or there could be numerous complicated applications submitted all at once. So excuse me, there are occasions where we can't meet them. We still do our best, but it happens from time to time where we can't. And we do ask that there be a deferral if that's possible. There is a lot of time spent also on trying to assess a proposal simply because there hasn't been sufficient detail provided with the application, or the plans are not to scale. So those are just things that we deal with and try to communicate that with the planners on staff. The last 4 points I can more or less speak to all at once. Really just a few things to mention here. We do still find there's confusion with respect to our two roles, as I mentioned earlier, being our regulatory role versus our advisory role. There seems to be confusion even at a municipal level as to, and the public, as to what the authority has the authority to require versus just advice. So that is something that we do try to communicate, but it seems there's still room to improve there. There's also occasions where the rationale for recommending changes to an application don't seem to be understood and not necessarily accepted always by the municipality. Our ultimate goal is to protect the environment, ensure we have safe development, but also accommodate requests for development as much as possible. But the bottom line is that quite often requires a compromise on both sides. And we do work very hard with applicants to arrive at that. It's not always possible because there is a resistance to compromise, we find. Not always, but common enough, and to try and meet those minimum standards. As mentioned before, many of the lots are very deficient in size. So if you couple that with the increased demand to convert these small cottage lots into full-time residences, it can be a real challenge. And we just like to stress the importance of recognizing the small size of many of these lots and the fact that they do have limitations, irregardless of the goal to drastically increase the footprint. So we just want to try and come to that compromise. So yeah, that's basically it for me. And I believe Erica, so if there's any questions, I hope we got through that in 10 minutes.
All right, I need you to not share your screen so I can see if there's any questions. Please unshare. All right. So any questions on the annual report from our planning and permitting?
Can't find the hand.
Just a quick question. I know we're out of time.
Faye was ahead of you, Eli. I'm sorry.
Okay, sorry. Go ahead, Faye.
Oh, sorry. I wondered what the difference is between recommendations and regulations. Do you have a list that we can look at, or is it just?
Yeah, yeah, definitely we can provide something like that. I believe slide number, one of the slides gave a real brief outline of the difference between the two. So the advisory role versus the regulatory role. I think the primary one to keep in mind would be when it comes to water body setback, the authority is not, we don't have regulatory role over that. That's a zoning bylaw amendment. We make comments and provide advice in that regard, but we don't have a regulatory role there. So that's commonly confused. When it comes to floodplain, generally, yes, not always, but generally, yes, there will be a regulatory role there where our policies can impede what's being proposed or possibly otherwise approved by the township. There's times where our policies come into play.
Yeah, I think Sally wants to provide an answer.
Hey, I'd be happy for us to come out to council or any of the councils and walk them through that. We actually did a presentation, RBCA and ourselves, to DNE to help explain exactly that, because it is confusing, and we're more than happy to present to any one of your councils. Just let me know if you want us to come out. In the meantime, we can send you information, but happy to present, Faye.
Thank you very much.
All right, Councillor Al-Shantiri.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the presentation. Quickly, I didn't see in your presentation any request of changing to the regulation. We've seen in area, and you said it yourself, is, you know, the easy land's already been developed, and now there's more challenge to start developing. But my biggest concern is the conflict between, like sometimes the CA will say no to a developer and the city on the same side, but then Committee of Adjustment or LPAT will overrule. Is there's a discussion somewhere to request the ministry to overlook at the LPAT and or the Committee of Adjustment decision to go in hand with, you know, with the professional of the municipality and the CA? Is there's I didn't see it in your presentation anywhere talk about this, but in a real life, that's what's happening. The conservation will say no, LPAT will say yes. Can we get something from staff? Are they going to write to the ministry or request changing to the
Sally,
LPAT decision?
Yeah, Sally will answer that. Sorry, dear.
So I think Conservation Ontario, through all the comments we've made to any number of legislative and regulatory changes, has raised that very point. And of course, the latest is the new changes to the Planning Act that would allow for, you know, MZO's ministerial zoning orders to ignore, quite frankly, provincial policy statement policies retroactively even. So not even just going forward, but ones on the books today. So there's a whole host of things that I think all the conservation authorities have concerns about. And I think the question, Eli, and happy to have more conversation about this, is how can conservation authorities, individual CAs like ourselves, respond effectively to this, both proactively in advance of something happening, as well as you know, when instances occur. So maybe that's something we could chat about further at a future meeting or offline.
Well, I would love to follow up with you on this, because that's a burning issue for me in my community. Been through 2 major floods and still see some approval even after being denied by the city or the conservation authority, and then to see it happen against our wish. So anyway, I will follow up with you, Sally. I'm meeting.
All right. Any other questions or comments on that annual report? All right, Sally, we're at 3 o'clock and I just wanted to check whether anyone needs, I don't want to cut this off if some people need to leave and would miss it. So would you have anybody who has to leave at 3? We have Krista, Roxanne. All right, Paul, I think there's quite a Bill. So we have quite a number of people.
Okay.
I think it's better to hear Andy's presentation when we have everyone. So the next thing would be other business. And I believe you had a brief update, Sally, that you wanted to go through.
Yes, so very quickly, I did follow up with the province regarding our application for an exemption to the 2-year term on the chair position, and I've yet to hear back from them. I did get an email this morning saying they're considering it, but absolutely no indication one way or the other. And so we remain with Janet in an acting chair position. Phil, I know you had made a suggestion about reaching out potentially to Minister Merrilee Fullerton. Quite frankly, I don't know what the best route is, so I'm happy to open it up for discussion.
Councillor El-Shantiri?
I think the best option is to leave Janet where she is and stop asking the ministry or anybody, if you ask me, because really we don't have an issue here, and let's not create one, please, by calling any MPP, because if those MPP wants to help, they could have helped us when they had the opportunity to change the legislation, because we reach out to them and they ignore all our recommendations. So Janet, she's acting, we have an acting chair, we have a vice chair. Let's move on, let's continue. Is anybody impacted by this? If it's not broken, let's continue with it. It's not illegal, it is legal. She's elected, duly elected.
Faye Campbell?
I agree with what El-Shantiri said. It's, sometimes the less said, the better. They know we're waiting and interested and really want it, but.
All right, on that note, yes, Bill King?
Well, I would just say, I don't think we have the luxury of ignoring the law. I think we should follow the rules.
Right, well, that's why we did ask for the exemption, so we are waiting on their result, but until we hear anything, I think what people are saying is don't stir the pot. I think that's what I'm hearing, so let's not stir the pot. All right, so with that, I need take my dog for a walk, so I'm going to, if there's no other business, resolve that the Board of Directors meeting be adjourned. I need someone to move. I see Councillor El-Shantiri, second Jeff Atkinson. All in favor? Motion is carried. So go out and enjoy the nice weather or get on to your next meetings. Thank you very much, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
All right.